Hello everyone, welcome to the Union Pacific Railroad Geneva Subdivision in N-Scale. My name is Daryl Cruz, owner and builder of the layout and your host for episode 26 of season 2020. This video is an update video on the work that I have been doing in Franklin Grove. And here we see a manifest train crossing the Mississippi River and approaching Franklin Grove. So we'll kind of get a first overview of what has taken place here in the Franklin Grove area. First of all, I did do some work on the farm, as you can see. Put in some gravel and some vehicles and some figures. That's just on the outskirts of Franklin Grove. And then you have Consolidated Grain and Barge. I did a little bit of work there, but most of the work has been done here in Franklin Grove itself. As you see the manifest train traveling through Franklin Grove. I first envisioned Franklin Grove back in 2008 when I first designed the Geneva Subdivision. And so a lot of these buildings and structures and so forth have been sitting here for quite a while. I think I got it mostly constructed in about 2010, and then it just kind of didn't have a whole lot done in Franklin Grove. So here you kind of see what it looked like for a long time. In this picture you can see that the buildings are there, but there's no roads, no crossing. Just basically a base scenery, and then the structures placed here and there. So that's kind of the way it has looked for quite some time. Here you can see the farm again. I just put the buildings where I thought they would go, and that's about all that was done. Here you get a little bit better look of how it's been for the last 10 years. Again, you just have the buildings down, the bare basic scenery. It's been painted and some ground foam put on. This is a building that I actually built in the 1990s. That's probably close to 30 years old. And again, this is a Walther's grain elevator. You probably recognize that. So for many years, it's just been kind of sitting here. And so here's the process I use to finally get work done. Once again, I use Smooth It road system by Woodland Scenics, and the first thing you do is put the foam tape down, cut the foam around the tracks, that goes down very quickly without too much trouble. And then once the foam is down, then you just slop on some Woodland Scenic Smooth It plaster. It's a special kind of plaster that dries hard, but it is very sandable. So you can sand it very easily. The particles come off very easily. So here you have it. I did have the forms removed, but it has yet to be sanded. You can see it's still pretty rough. Have to let it dry for at least a full 24 hours, depending on how thick it is. But I always give it at least a full day. Sometimes it takes more than 24 hours. Has to be completely dry. If it's just a little bit wet, it won't sand properly. And one thing I do before I actually get around to sanding is I put some masking tape around the plaster, and that's just to control the mess from the sanding. The sanding is very, very messy, and the powder is so fine that once it gets on the track or on the surrounding scenery, it's hard to get it off. You can't just vacuum it up. I mean, you can vacuum it up, but the residue stays. So here you see all the fine powder after sanding it on the blue masking tape. So it just helps to kind of keep the layout from getting too messy. All right, once I took off the masking tape, you can see there is still some white powder that's kind of in the mix there, but we'll kind of take care of that in a little bit. It's not too bad that it gets on the scenery because you can cover that up with ground foam pretty well. It's on the ballast that it really kind of is hard to take care of. I use a knife to cut out grooves for the flangeways to pass through. I have this old Cottle truck that I use to make sure that there's clearance. This is a very old Cottle truck that has the larger flanges. So basically, if these flanges clear the tracks, then we're good for all the other wheel sets that travel on. Here's all the buildings waiting to go back on. Looks like a tornado hit. All right, once the sanding was done and everything was correct, I went ahead and painted it with the first coat of paint. See a train going through. Already looks a little better with there actually being a road. Hey, it looks pretty good. Still a lot to do though. Hey, now I put some additional gravel around the road and also put ground foam on. I did the ground foam first, and then when the ground foam was down, then I sprinkled this ballast or the gravel on. Also put some additional ballast where there was plaster on the track ballast. Have to cover up all the white. And then once it was all in place and it looked good, I went ahead and sprayed it with soapy water to get it wet, and then put in a bunch of diluted white glue. Looks pretty messy. Once it dried, I went ahead and put a final coat of paint on the road. The glue that ends up on the road kind of makes it look a mess. So I put another coat of paint on to kind of even out the colors and have all the ballast and gravel down to cover up any white powder. This is the BLMA concrete crossing that I've been using for all my crossings, and I use it because that's basically what's used on the prototype Union Pacific Geneva subdivision. So it's just a matter of gluing the crossings down onto the road. And when I sanded the road, I made sure I kind of left a little bit of clearance. So when I put the crossing material on, that the road plus the crossing material was still lower than the rails. The rails obviously have to be a little bit higher. Otherwise you'll have some connection or connectivity problems between the engines and the rails. And it'll just be bumpy going across too. The railroad crossing markings is from highways and byways. And the only place I know of to get the crossing materials, their dry transfers, is MidwestModelersRR.com. It's a hobby shop in Independence, Missouri, I think, someplace around Kansas City. They have a lot of good prices on lots of different things. So I've ordered other stuff from them, but they definitely have the crossing materials. Now, if you notice, I put some pictures in also in the backdrop there. So that's actually a picture of downtown Franklin Grove. So you get kind of an idea that the road goes on. And then I also put a picture here by Consolidated Grain and Barge, although that picture, after looking at it, it kind of turned out to be a little bit too big, so I changed it to a smaller version of that picture. And so here again you can see the picture to the very right on the first road. All right, the next thing was to get this Pitzer and Sons grain elevator repaired and refurbished and put down firmly in place. As you know, some of the siding had fallen off. The stuff is just sitting there. Some of the glue had come undone on the building. And then I also put already, as you can see, the Rick's Products grain elevator main structure there. I had one that I built from scratch that was very crude. This looks a lot better with the ladders and everything. So that was one big improvement. Again, I built this originally in 1990 on my layout back in Independence, Missouri. Here you see I did finally glue all the silo pieces back on. Some of them are sticking out a little bit, but it kind of looks realistic to me. Those are Campbell models, Campbell scale models, aluminum corrugated aluminum sheets that I basically cut into pieces and then glued them onto PVC pipe. This is a building that I don't know what it does, but this is after a prototype in Pleasant Hill, Missouri, and they had that building there, so I built it also. And as you know, I also fabricated a little downshoot there to load the grain cars from the grain elevator, and then I also put the conveyor chutes on there. That's just plastic tubing, not tubing, plastic rod. And then I finally now have all the silos carefully in place. I threaded the plastic rods into the silos and then glued them in place. I glued the buildings all down, put the little pipe into the main structure there. Now this is Pitzer and Sons now. When I originally built this after a co-op in Pleasant Hill, Missouri, I was looking at Google Maps on Pleasant Hill, and that silo's not there anymore. Actually, the silos are there, but a lot of the structures are missing. Again, this was built in around 1990, so this is a 30-year-old building that I'm refurbishing. I think it still stands up today. Here you get another look at the downspout to load the grain cars. So it's looking pretty good. And next up was to put some gravel in and around the building. That just kind of ties the building into the terrain, so it looks like it's part of, and it's actually built into the ground. I added the door finally. Also added a vehicle. And I also put in some gravel around Consolidated Grain and Barge. And then also put the gravel around the farm. And here we kind of see the finished product. The gravel, I wetted it down and put some diluted white glue, so it's now dry. Put some figures in there, some junk around this area, and a couple more figures. Kind of add some interest, some vehicles, the guy walking into the shop there. I weathered the road also. Makes it look a little better as we see a train going through. So this is what it looks like today. Could probably add some more details, but this is completed to the point where I think I'm ready to move on to the next. area of the layout. Put some cracks in the road also. So again, it's done to the point where I think I can move on. I added some more vehicles here and put a couple figures loading a crate onto the truck. There's a picture that I put at the end of this road that I think blends in pretty good. Could add some fencing maybe in the neighborhood. Kids playing on the slide there possibly. Put a couple more figures by that house there too. So I think I will move on now to Wheaton, which is a huge project. But that's probably what I'll be looking to do next. You can notice here I replaced the picture with a smaller picture so it looks more in perspective. Looked a little big before. Overall, it looks pretty good though, I think. And then finally, here's the farm area. Added some vehicles, have a cow there. A couple guys trying to get the cow into the barn. And here you can see the road kind of goes off. The backdrop picture there has a road going by, so it kind of looks like it's a turn off of the road. I notice I need to paint the backdrop there a little bit. I'll probably do that before I move on. And you got the old man at the house. There's the guys getting the cow into the barn. The silos there is again, that's the Rick's Products grain silos. So it looks like it's more a part of the scene now, not just some buildings plopped down. So overall, I think it turned out pretty good. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned something about how to put a scene together. And I hope you continue to enjoy model railroading. Next up will be some more operating videos. Not sure which ones I'm going to do next. But again, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.